Welcome everyone to the conclusion of week 1 here in the LEC 2023 Summer Split live from Berlin, Germany. EXO and SK have yet to pick up a win in the past 2 days, but one of them is bound to succeed today in our opening match. I am Frankie, I am joined by Goldborg and Kadron and this beautiful live audience here in Berlin. We see you, we love you. But right now we're gonna keep things chill on the analyst desk as we talk about what's happened so far. Goldborg, you enjoying the summer?
I would say so far. I think that games have shown good highlights of some quality, and I also think we have some adaptation within what teams are trying to achieve, at least with moving around the map and fighting for these 5v5s as we see in some of the crazy LPL games as well. So I've been entertained. I will say some of them, of course, haven't been as clean, but isn't that just part of the fun?
That is part of the fun. Kadron, I'm loving your hair today.
Thanks. I've been out, got a new haircut, been in the sun. I've been feeling really refreshed coming back into summer. Like, I feel like it's a new me.
Yeah, and it's so good to have you on the analyst desk again after all this time. Now, as we throw up the standings, let's hone in a little bit on our undefeated teams at the top, starting with a revitalized Fnatic, Kadron.
Definitely is, and I think this bot lane has just changed the whole dynamic of the team. You look back to spring and winter, and it didn't really feel like they had a lane to play through on that bot side. Such a bot-heavy meta, but now with Noah and Trimby just dominating these lanes, even in losing matchups, finding ways to get good trades, it really feels like the top side has lost a lot of pressure in making plays, and now they can rely on their AD carry and their support to make the plays happen in team.
And I just feel like they've become so good at becoming a team fighting team for what we've seen so far. And it's not just Noah, because Noah, for one thing, absolutely amazing in team fights. His movement, his positioning, everything has been stellar so far. But it's also the way that his team is buying space for him. I think Oscar and specifically have been super crucial on the K'Sante actually in opening that gap as well for Noah. And when they just take over the team fights, they take over the game and they just win them.
They definitely do. His positioning is something to highlight. He's just been, I mean, he's deathless so far in the league, right? He hasn't died a single time. And I think next to Trimby with these scaling picks, he can just run amok in these fights, even if the game is even. So I feel like they've got the reliability factor, which has actually made it so their top side's been playing even better. I think Razork and Humanoid have been playing through mids so well. And you can see there, the DPM. 1,000 DPM, second in the league behind FLICKR. Gold per minute, CSD, everything's going their way.
Yeah, it's enough to make you feel really excited about Fnatic versus G2 later today. But from Deathless to Deathbringer, because FLICKR returning to Heretics has really given them a whole new look.
Yeah, I think FLICKR has been absolutely amazing so far, especially the early game. This is kind of what was promised with Jack Spectra, but they unfortunately couldn't replicate from the ERL levels where he was able to do that. But FLICKR himself specifically has been absolutely crucial in that early game, from just getting leads already then to really just taking it into the mid game and taking over every single team fight. And he's so willing to take space for himself as well. We're talking about Noah. FLICKR has become so aggressive too.
Yeah, we know him for his Draven in G2, but we also know him for things like the Senna Seraphine bot lanes with Targamas where they were playing weak side. Now he can really play that strong side, right? He's the highest damage AD carry we've got in this league, so he's just popping off in those fights. Heretics look like they found a breath of fresh air with these new carries.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see the synergy is building with every game we see from them. So hopefully we're going to see even more today. Also, shout out to Viteo, because we're finally seeing him playing comfortably in 2023. But we've got to now talk about the Mad Lions, because they were mauling after MSI, but they have come back stronger than ever, really, for a season start this year.
It just feels like, you know, the early game is so fantastic, and a lot of that we don't usually highlight a lot of our top laners, but Chasey has been absolutely phenomenal against Vitality, where he just found solo kills, despite the bot lane falling apart a bit. But also Carsey specifically, I think in the Xayah game against G2, at first when they were playing against the Neeko, they really struggled, but it was like he kind of calibrated himself with the Xayah to figure out when the ultimate was actually going to come through, to have the Xayah ultimate in response, and in essence just make G2 overcommit again and again and again.
Yeah, sitting at 2-0 now, Mad Lions. Everyone doubts them at MSI. The 1647 memes run amok, and I feel like the biggest thing they took from MSI was mid-wave, how important it is. They've been contesting every single mid-wave before the objective spawns. They've been photosynthesizing throughout summer.
They really have. You've been photosynthesizing too, by the looks of it. You've got good color on your skin today, Kadron. We should talk really about which of these teams can retain that clean sheet. Who is going to be 3-0 at the end of the day? Do you think all three of them can sustain?
I mean, I think for sure that they all have shown good highlights that should replicate that for them in that. I don't know about you specifically, but I feel like all of them have shown good lights that can really carry it through to saying that they would become a 3-0 team, and they all have star players to really work through as well.
Definitely do. So it's interesting. The league's all shaken up, you know. Heretics, Fnatic contesting the top pot. Koi's a little bit shaky. SK, Astralis, and XL yet to find a win. But of course, SK and XL, one of them win today.
What about G2, though? Do you think they can bring things back versus Fnatic? Because I think they had to learn a hard lesson yesterday, but they can learn lessons quickly.
Maybe I'm a bit controversial with this, but I'd rather see Caps int like this on Neeko, where it looked like he was having fun. It felt like he was in form. It felt like he was experimenting, because, yeah, it turned into a loss and they all did a bit too much trolling. But that's rather the G2 I want to see, that the one that was kind of in a slump.
I want to see a G2 that wins.
I mean, that, you know, you got to take
could have
the
won
bittersweet
yesterday,
with the
though.
sweet. You know, it's a bit of both. You can't really get all the things.
Well, you know what? Speaking of Caps, yesterday we got to see him and others play Neeko on the Rift, and that was medium success. Obviously, great success, Nook. But let's not keep talking about Caps. We're going to talk instead with Kadron and Ender, because they would actually like to switch things up to the LCK to talk about Neeko.
Wait, I thought you were...
Dude, did you like my blast cone thing? My like
That was
tech?
crazy. I totally...
You fell for it?
And sinker, yeah.
I just W'd over here and swapped back to normal.
Give me an ulti, maybe? Oh,
do you feel it?
Yeah, you just hit me too. That's absolutely crazy. Well, yeah, we've had Neeko mid lane, but I don't know. I feel like some people get a little bit more creative around the world, and Canyon bust out the Neeko jungle. So tell me about all the wacky things he did.
So it's going to be a little bit informative, but it's also going to be a wacky. So if we can play through the clip, you can see like they flexed the Neeko on blue side. So many random things happen this game. So we're going to go through all of them all. So he's going to start as a minion with W, and oftentimes when I'm watching the LCK and I see the camera go over to his jungle clear and I'm seeing a minion clear out blue buff.
David versus Goliath.
I'm already like, what the hell's going on? Every single camp, this guy is like swapping into different shapes and forms, and he just power farms through the jungle. So you got a Scion Leash with W.
Yep.
What time do you think he's going to finish a full clear on?
I mean, a mage shot like 3 minutes, 3:10, something like that.
You'd expect that, right? He finishes his full clear at about 255, 256, which is bonkers. So if you look at the minimap, you can see, I don't know if you can bring it up. Anyway, you can see it on the full screen. The minimap, the fact that Poppy's moving over to her Raptors, he's just finished red.
He's
and
like
now
2 camps ahead of her.
He's 2 camps ahead. A small leash, you'll have to say, but yeah, now he's going to finish Krugs. What's he going to transform into?
I mean, a blue buff.
Bot dive inbound?
Yeah.
What's gonna dive bot? It's the mini Krug. The mini Krug is diving bots. And then you can see the bot lane of Nongshim is just laning, and all of a sudden they look behind them. There's a mini Krug, first blood over to Damwon, and it gets wackier. A lot of these transformations maybe don't do much. I mean, the small hitbox maybe realize it a little bit later on before you're getting dove. But it's just funny to see every time you go towards a champion, as informative it is. If you see things like Gromp ganking mid lane, you're just questioning what the hell's going on anymore.
Yeah, I also feel like, especially like once you've passed like something like level 6, if it's the first time you're coming out of Fog of War, enemy champion doesn't see what level you are, so they're not ready for like the ultimate. Obviously, you're hiding the ulti too.
So let's pause here. You're Dundun, right? You're playing Poppy into Scion, you're gonna get a good trade. So if you play it out from his vision, he's gonna get a good trade on the Kana. I'll push this wave in. Now pause.
Hold on.
Is that Kana?
He just healed all of his health back.
He did heal his health back. Canyon misplayed it. If Canyon actually took the health that he took away and then they swapped, this play would work. But look at the idea behind it.
Because the health bar that you take is from the moment you transform, you get whatever health he has.
Exactly.
So he transformed too early.
So if they lose health, you transform too early and it looks like you healed. So Dundun, I think, realized this at this point. But if you play it, you can see what the idea was. They're going to try Neeko ult Proto Belt and then Scion ult back out of Fog of War. So it didn't work, but the idea was good. And you can see the players, they're just laughing to themselves. They're having a great time.
Yeah, and someone's going to get baited by that. Like, and the thing is, you can do this like not just on jungle Neeko. If you're trying to like lane gank with a lane Neeko or something like this, like you can just turn into the support or something if you're running through bot lane.
That's exactly it. And oftentimes you see in pro play, you're looking at the minions, and everyone talks about counting the minions, but also you have to really keep track of what's actually happening on the map, because not only can you do that through lanes, any lane whatsoever, even in the early game, like we didn't even see a minion gank level 4 from Canyon, which could have worked. Even in the mid to late game, you can see 2 Kellins going into ward. You know, what happens here, there's not actually anything that happens, but just keep your eyes on how many times Canyon W's. W, recall, you'll see that oftentimes.
Because what's the cooldown on that thing?
It's like 5 seconds, 6 seconds cooldown at this point. So he's going to spam it out on purpose, because sometimes you'll try and cancel those recall and use spells, and when you do, how many Leonas are on the screen right now? I don't know, there's 3 of them.
Crazy.
Which one's Leona? This is the kind of thing that you really need to keep your eye on with Neeko.
I also think like there he was staying in Fog of War while sending the W out. That's a little bit more, because you don't necessarily know that that's the W, right? When you don't see 2 on the screen, you're not as concerned about it.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And as much as these were things that could happen to Neeko before, we haven't seen Neeko that much in pro play. So when you see here in the LEC and the mid laners are playing it, you can see them walk into jungle, bait out spells. You can also, in a team fight a dragon, turn into your Jinx. Press W. There's 3 Jinxes when a Jarvan's going in. Makes things a little bit more complicated when you have no vision. And I think you can really play with the enemy's minds with Neeko in more ways than just I'm a minion in a lane.
100%. Yeah, I mean, we'll leave that to Caps. That's his specialty for the time being. But yeah, I think anything that baits the enemy team into you, because Neeko's problem is still pretty limited range. Like, if she doesn't have flash, it's really hard for her to find a backliner. We saw that a lot with like Caps trying to dive in, especially with the Xayah. So those transforms to bait players into you, that's free ults every time, because you're also hiding that initial cast of the ultimate.
I just think this ult is absurd, especially when we saw the Caps solo kill onto Niski. The wind-up is invisible. You don't actually see it. So as much as Niski kind of died on that mid-wave and looked a bit troll, you can't really blame him because he was invisible on the ult anyway, and he flashed before he could realize.
It was a heartbreaker for that play right there. But enough from us here. We're going to send it over to Trouble, who's sitting with SK's mid laner Sertuss ahead of their game versus Excel.
Thank you very much, Ender. Sertuss, thank you so much for joining me for the interview ahead of the first game that you got versus Excel. It's been a tough weekend, but let's take it and let's start it from somewhere which was really good for you guys, the winter split. What worked back then, you think, in your team?
I think we were ahead of the meta, like back then, in winter split. Like, we had really good drafts. We had a good identity to what to play, right? Like Zeri, Yumi bot lane, Vi jungle, and like CC setup champs on mid lane, right? And it worked for us. And yeah, right now we are a bit struggling.
What would you say is the part that you're struggling to translate from winter to now?
Honestly, I think it's just playing on stage. Like our scrims, they have been good. Like also, like I think we're a team that practiced 1 or 2 weeks earlier than other teams for the summer split, and we just struggle a bit playing like how we play in scrims, and that's
So what is it that you guys do in scrims that it doesn't necessarily translate onto the stage? Do you play more carefree, more aggressive?
More aggressive for sure, and doing less mistakes, especially in the early games. Like I think yesterday, and also against who did we play? We played Vitality, right? And we made silly mistakes in the early game. So just the early part, I would say.
All right, and talking about the games, the 2 previous games this weekend, what were the major things that you would take away that you have learned from these 2 to adapt into today's game versus Excel?
It's more about early game, I would say. We were struggling in the early phase and keeping up the pressure and trying to not die, I would say. Because like, I mean, against Vitality, it was kind of rough because of this statics shift LeBlanc build, because we had the game in our hand, and then just mid to late game was really hard. But yeah, this time we just tried to be ahead from the early part.
Well, you said on your tweet yesterday you were 4-0, you blinked twice, and suddenly you're 2 levels down all of a sudden. Now, Sertuss, of course, it has been a rough weekend for Excel as well as yourself, guys. How do you see this matchup today?
I think our last win we had was in spring split, also against Excel, and I think like we almost had a perfect game against them. So I hope we can show this again. Like I mean, we are not looking really great at the moment, but they are also not looking great. And I'm really confident in us. Like we have a lot of potential, and it's a bit sad to always say potential, right, and not showing it like on stage. But we are actually a really good team, and I hope we can show our strengths that we already showed in Winter Split.
Well, thank you so much for the interview, Sertuss. I hope you guys do show up today versus Excel. It's a very important game for both of you guys. So thank you so much for joining me. Medivedi, over to you.